In this episode, we're going to slow down and cement the mental map that ties incident readiness, incident response phases, and SOC coordination into one coherent operating picture you can recall under exam pressure. When learners study incident response, it is common to remember the phase names but forget what each phase is trying to achieve, which leads to muddled answers and, in real situations, muddled decisions. The goal of this spaced review is not to add new concepts, but to strengthen the connections between what you prepare ahead of time, how the response cycle unfolds, and how the SOC plugs into that cycle without creating chaos. Strong programs do not rely on heroics or improvisation, because they rely on readiness conditions that make evidence available, decisions clear, and actions coordinated. As we move through this review, keep one simple truth in mind. Incident response is a team process that turns uncertainty into controlled action, and the SOC is the function that keeps evidence and coordination aligned so the team does not waste time debating what is real. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. The first anchor to lock in is what preparation really means, because preparation is often misunderstood as writing a plan that nobody reads. Preparation is the set of conditions that must already be true before an incident begins, because you cannot build those conditions while an attacker is moving or while a business outage is growing. Those conditions include reliable telemetry collection and retention, clear escalation criteria, clear roles and authority for decisions, and communication channels that are ready to carry sensitive information without confusion. Preparation also includes routine habits that make incident work feel familiar, such as consistent alert classification, consistent documentation, and practiced handoffs between shifts. When preparation is weak, the response cycle starts with a scramble for access, a scramble for logs, and arguments about who can approve containment actions, and those delays are where incidents expand. When preparation is strong, the team begins with a controlled evidence picture and a known path to decision, which is why preparation is often the biggest determinant of how painful an incident will be. For exam thinking, preparation is not a separate optional phase, but the foundation that supports every later phase. A second anchor is evidence readiness, because incidents are won and lost on whether the team can quickly assemble a truthful story from observations. Evidence readiness means the right sources are collected, moved off systems quickly enough to reduce tampering risk, normalized enough to correlate across identity, endpoint, network, and application domains, and retained long enough to see what happened before the first alert. It also means evidence is interpretable, with stable identifiers and consistent time alignment, because timelines collapse when clocks drift or when fields are missing. Evidence readiness includes pipeline health monitoring, because silent loss of telemetry is a blind spot that can be mistaken for attacker quietness. It includes access boundaries that preserve integrity, so that people who analyze evidence are not casually able to delete or rewrite it. Evidence readiness is not about hoarding data, but about making data usable, trustworthy, and quickly searchable when the pressure is high. If you remember one exam-ready point, remember that investigation speed is largely determined by whether evidence was prepared to be investigated, not by whether analysts can type fast. A third anchor is tooling access readiness, because even perfect evidence is useless when the right people cannot reach it quickly and safely. Tooling access readiness means analysts can query and pivot through evidence without waiting for permissions during the most time-sensitive moments. And it also means those permissions are controlled so sensitive evidence is not broadly exposed. Role design matters here, because investigators need search and correlation capabilities while collection engineers need pipeline controls, and mixing those roles increases risk and increases confusion. Access readiness also includes resilience, because incidents often coincide with outages, and containment actions can change connectivity, so a response plan that depends on a single fragile platform can fail at the worst moment. A well-prepared environment has clear, predictable access paths, and a shared understanding of which tools support the first hour of investigation. Training is part of access readiness, because tools that exist but are unfamiliar become obstacles under pressure. Force-based review. Remember that access is both a capability and a control, because you want speed without sacrificing integrity or privacy. A fourth anchor is documentation readiness, because documentation is the mechanism that turns individual observations into shared understanding across time, shifts, and teams. During incidents, the narrative changes quickly, and without a consistent record, people repeat work and make decisions based on memory or rumor. Documentation readiness means there is a consistent case structure that captures the current hypothesis, the evidence that supports it, what has been ruled out, what actions were taken, and why decisions were approved. It also means evidence references are reproducible, so another analyst can validate a claim by following the same pivots rather than trusting an impression. Documentation supports accountability, but the more immediate benefit is speed, because a clear record reduces debate and enables parallel work. A good SOC practice is to treat documentation as part of the investigation itself rather than as a report written later, because writing down what you think forces clarity about what you know and what you are assuming. For exam thinking, documentation is not a bureaucratic detail, but a control that prevents confusion and supports learning after the incident ends. Now shift to the incident response cycle itself and lock in that each phase has a purpose, because remembering the purpose is what prevents phase mixing under pressure. The cycle is commonly described as preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, and learning, and these are not just labels for a diagram. Detection and analysis is about turning signals into a defensible understanding of what is happening and what matters first, while containment is about limiting harm even while uncertainty remains. Eradication is about removing the cause and the attacker's foothold, while recovery is about restoring trustworthy operation without reintroducing the same weakness. Learning is about improving telemetry, workflow, and decision criteria so the next incident is less costly. Phase mixing is a common failure, such as jumping to recovery before eradication is complete, which can create a loop where the attacker returns. Another failure is staying stuck in analysis mode while the incident spreads, because the team waits for perfect certainty before acting. When you can state the purpose of each phase clearly, you can justify what should happen next in scenario questions, and you can recognize when a response is drifting into chaos. Detection and analysis is the phase where the SOC tends to be most visible, but it is important to remember that detection is more than an alert firing. Detection includes recognizing patterns across multiple alerts, noticing when telemetry changes unexpectedly, and spotting activity that does not fit the organization's normal baseline. Analysis is building and testing a hypothesis using evidence, which includes confirming what is true, identifying scope, and estimating impact. The SOC plugs in by correlating identity events, endpoint behaviors, network patterns, and application actions into a coherent story with stable pivots. Enrichment becomes critical here because you cannot judge urgency without knowing which accounts are privileged and which assets are critical. A key beginner misunderstanding is believing that analysis must be complete before action begins, when the real goal is to reach enough confidence to support safe next steps. The SOC contributes by communicating what is known and what is uncertain, which prevents leadership from assuming certainty and prevents teams from acting on rumors. In spaced review terms, detection and analysis is the phase where the SOC converts raw signals into an evidence-based narrative that drives coordinated action. Containment is where coordination challenges often explode, which is why preparation and decision points matter so much. Containment aims to limit harm, reduce spread, and protect critical assets while the investigation continues, and it often involves actions that can disrupt operations. The SOC plugs in by providing targeted recommendations based on evidence, such as which identities appear abused, which systems show signs of compromise, and which pathways look like movement corridors. Containment should be staged when possible, beginning with reversible steps that reduce uncertainty and limit risk without causing unnecessary outages, then moving toward more disruptive actions when confidence and impact justify them. A common misunderstanding is thinking containment always means shutting things down, when in practice containment is often about narrowing access and reducing attacker options. Containment also depends on preserving evidence, because careless containment can overwrite artifacts or break log collection, which can make eradication less precise. For exam thinking, remember that containment is a business-informed technical action guided by evidence, and the SOC's role is to keep those actions targeted, timely, and coordinated. Eradication is distinct from containment because it is about removing the attacker's ability to continue and preventing immediate recurrence through the same access paths. During eradication, the SOC supports the work by showing what the attacker touched, what access they used, and what suspicious behavior patterns suggest persistence. This phase benefits from careful scope tracking because attackers often create multiple footholds, and removing only one can create a false sense of victory. The SOC also contributes by validating whether suspicious activity stops for the right reasons, which means distinguishing between attacker quietness and loss of telemetry. Another common pitfall is assuming a password reset or a system reboot is enough, when eradication often requires broader cleanup of access changes, unauthorized configurations, and hidden persistence mechanisms. Eradication decisions should be based on evidence rather than assumption, but they also must be timely, because lingering footholds can be exploited quickly. In spaced review terms, eradication is where the team turns the narrative built during analysis into targeted removal actions, and the SOC helps keep that targeting precise through continuous evidence validation. Recovery is the phase where business urgency is often highest, because the organization wants services restored and normal work resumed. The critical concept to remember is that recovery is not just restoration, but trustworthy restoration, meaning systems return to operation in a state you can defend as clean and stable enough to rely on. The SOC plugs in by monitoring the return to normal, confirming that key telemetry is functioning, watching for recurrence of suspicious patterns, and validating that the recovery steps did not reopen the same access paths. Recovery also depends on understanding normal behavior baselines, because post-incident activity often includes unusual administrative actions and operational changes that can confuse detections. The SOC's job is to keep monitoring meaningful during recovery by distinguishing expected recovery actions from signs of attacker persistence or renewed exploitation. A common pitfall is treating recovery as the end of the incident, when in reality recovery is a controlled reentry where trust is rebuilt step by step. For exam questions, remember that recovery success includes verification and monitoring, not just uptime, and the SOC is essential to that verification. Learning is the phase that turns one painful incident into long-term improvement, and it is often the difference between organizations that mature and organizations that repeat the same failures. Learning should capture what signals were present, which were missed, which were noisy, which decisions were slow, and which coordination points caused friction. The SOC plugs in by converting these lessons into practical improvements, such as tuning detections that produced backlog, enriching data that lacked context, improving pipeline health monitoring to prevent silent gaps, and refining escalation criteria to trigger incident mode at the right time. Learning also includes improving communication paths and decision points, because delays often come from unclear authority or unclear messaging rather than from technical complexity. A common mistake is treating learning as a meeting where people complain, when the real goal is to produce changes that can be verified and measured. This is where earlier alert lifecycle concepts connect directly to incident outcomes, because the quality of detection, classification, response, and tuning determines how fast the team moved. In spaced review terms, learning is how the cycle becomes a cycle because it feeds improvements back into preparation. Now lock in the coordination essentials, because incident response is not only a sequence of technical tasks, but a coordination system where evidence and action must stay aligned. Coordination begins with communication paths that separate information flow from decision flow so updates do not get confused with approvals. It also requires defined roles, including an incident commander, IC, who protects focus, tracks decisions, and maintains a single shared narrative of scope and status. Decision points must be explicit, such as when to declare an incident, when to shift from investigation to containment, when to expand scope, and when to restore services, because vague decision points create debate and delay. The SOC supports coordination by providing evidence packages that are clear, reproducible, and honest about uncertainty, which helps leadership decide without being misled by incomplete information. Coordination also requires update cadence, so leaders stay informed without constantly interrupting investigators. And it requires confidentiality discipline so sensitive evidence is shared with purpose. For exam thinking, remember that coordination failures often cause more damage than technical gaps because the best tools cannot compensate for conflicting actions and delayed decisions. Another essential coordination idea is that the SOC must help maintain monitoring integrity during an incident because incidents can degrade telemetry through attacker actions, system instability, or containment changes. The SOC should watch for signs of degraded visibility, such as sudden silence from critical sources, rising parsing failures, or increasing ingestion delay, and treat those as urgent because they affect every other decision. Monitoring integrity also includes adapting expectations as response actions change the environment, because containment and recovery can create unusual activity that looks suspicious unless context is captured and communicated. This is where consistent documentation and action tracking become crucial, because the investigation timeline must include what the defenders did, not just what the attacker did. When monitoring integrity is protected, the team can interpret signals correctly and avoid the dangerous assumption that fewer alerts means less threat. For beginners, the key is to see the SOC as responsible not only for detecting the incident, but for keeping the evidence stream trustworthy while the environment is changing rapidly. This is a coordination role as much as a technical role because it keeps everyone anchored in reality. A final way to strengthen your recall is to connect preparation and coordination into one pre-incident investment, because most incident chaos comes from not having those connections established. Preparation ensures evidence is available, access works, and documentation habits are consistent, while coordination ensures communication paths and decision points are known, roles are defined, and authority is clear. When those are in place, the response phases can proceed with less friction because detection and analysis produce a coherent narrative. Containment actions are targeted and approved quickly. Eradication is precise rather than guess-based. Recovery is verified rather than rushed, and learning produces measurable improvements. When those are missing, the team gets stuck in unproductive loops, such as debating whether it is an incident, arguing over whether to isolate a system, or restarting investigations each shift because the record is unclear. For exam scenarios, this is often the hidden lesson behind the question, because many prompts describe technical symptoms, but the best answer involves improving readiness, evidence handling, and coordination. If you can explain how readiness and coordination prevent phase mixing and delay, you are demonstrating operational maturity, not just vocabulary. To close out this spaced review, remember that incident response success comes from a cycle model that is understood, a readiness foundation that is already built, and a coordination system that keeps evidence and decisions aligned under pressure. Preparation gives you trustworthy evidence, reliable access, and documentation discipline, which prevents investigations from collapsing into guesswork. The response phases each have a purpose, and knowing that purpose prevents the team from jumping to recovery too early or staying in analysis too long while harm grows. The SOC plugs into every phase by collecting and correlating evidence, communicating clearly, guiding containment with context, validating eradication, verifying recovery, and translating lessons into tuned detections and improved pipelines. Coordination essentials like clear roles, clear decision points, controlled communication paths, and a predictable update cadence are what make the cycle executable by real humans, not just describable on a diagram. If you carry one takeaway into the exam, carry the idea that preparation and coordination are force multipliers. They make every later action faster, safer, and more coherent, which is exactly what prevents chaos when the first incident hits.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.